Called summer camp for central bankers to kick off. Let's go to the man who actually said that Fed Chair Jerome Powell should step down from the job as head of the Federal Reserve. And he said this a month ago. He is Allianz's chief economic advisor and former CEO of PIMCO, Mohamed El-Erian, one of the most widely followed economists around the globe. You said that before we got the most recent data for the producer price index. This is prices at the wholesale level. And the PPI showed that prices went higher than expected. It almost was like a flashing warning signal saying, here comes inflation. And who knows how much longer the wholesalers can actually shoulder that. I mean, we can put the numbers up and compare them to how consumer inflation, which is still pretty calm, right? It's almost like a warning signal. Do you still believe that we should see a rate cut in September?
I do. And I do because of the employment side. So let's first deal with the employment side. Every indicator I look at, Liz, suggests that the labor market is weakening.
Before he unpacks that, don't forget to like and subscribe. And for those of you who are just joining the channel, I have been calling for this for quite some time now, and continuing to say, like, the Federal Reserve is in a pickle. The old school game of pickle, you one guy in the middle, two players in the opposite end, and you're running trying to tag the guy in the middle out, and you get closer and closer. That, in short, is called stagflation, and that is, it feels like that's where we're headed, or maybe we're already there. I'm not an economist. I'm just a guy on YouTube talking. I work in the real estate industry, and this is just what, the eyeball test is kind of where you can eyeball it and see. Doesn't take a genius to figure that out. Especially with those job reports that had to be revised several months ago, I think dating back to, did they say June? So it feels like the Fed, they don't want to lower rates, but they'll have to because of the job market or the unemployment numbers. So they're like, I don't think they have a choice at this point. I mean, you always have a choice, but we'll see. So very interesting.
And the risk here is that it weakens in an accelerated fashion. And if that happens, it is very difficult to come back from that shock quickly. What about prices? Yes, PPI was hotter than expected, but we learned two things today. We learned from the corporate earnings that companies are taking the increase in cost in their margins so far. Why? Because some of them don't have pricing power. So some of them don't feel confident they can pass on the higher tariffs. We've also learned from the Japanese number that the exporters to the US are also taking the hit themselves. So the pass-through will not be as high as many people feel it will be.
The pass-through not as high. Okay, so you don't see inflation rising or rearing a very ugly head for the consumer in the next several months or at all?
So I see inflation stable in the 2.5% to 3% range. I think if the Fed were to decide on a target today, as opposed to be hostage to a target from the old days, it would be in the 2.5% to 3% range. That is stable inflation for an economy going through so much structural change.
Let's educate our viewers for a second who might not be that familiar with the machinations of the Fed. Fed Chair Powell isn't the decider. It is a group of 12 voting members. So let's just be clear on that. He's not the one who says, yes, we have to cut rates or keep them on pause or hike them. That said, the president, as we said, has put a really tough pressure campaign on Powell. I mean, suddenly accusing him of overspending on redoing the Federal Reserve building. He showed up at the Fed construction site and had Powell show him around. It was a little bit of a dog and pony show. All the media were there. Everybody got to sit there and watch while he showed him this cost overrun. And some of it was on point, some of it apparently wasn't. But that said, now you have the Lisa Cook issue where, and there may be some there, we don't know yet, but the allegation is that she has pulled off some mortgage fraud, allegedly. Is this where we're going, where the president is having people investigated so that he can then remove them or have them resign, which he posted, resign immediately, so that he can put his own candidates in there?
So first,
ooh, man, that's a difficult question. Man, Man, yeah, I heard a little bit about that story about the mortgage fraud. I'm gonna do a reaction video on that tonight as well, but I gotta do some more deep diving into that one just to get all the facts. Digging up dirt to get push people out, man. If that's not mob boss status, I don't know what is. On the same token, hey, it's like you the old what's that old state property movie? You either get down or lay down. This is one of those moments, and I think that the shakeup is real, and I think Trump definitely wants what he wants, and he's willing to go and do things that you're not, and that's one of the 48 laws of power. Don't go to war with someone that you not that you're not willing to take it there with. So I don't know. You got to understand what you're doing and your opponent, but yeah, it's getting kind of spooky out there. I don't know. I would not want any job in the Federal Reserve at any capacity, and just because I don't think it's solvable. I think it's one of those things that, yes, I do think rates need to start trimming down just a hair, just to give a little bit of take some pressure off the valves. That being said, which will help a lot of people in the real estate industry for sure. Um, which is one of the things I do like about Trump. But that's oh man, it's just a sticky situation. I really don't know. I'm not, obviously we were letting it play out in real time, but it's like you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. So there's no good, clear path here that I see anyway. I'm not again, I'm just a guy on YouTube, who knows? But very fascinating, very interesting. Let's let him I'm curious how he answers this question. They put him on the spot.
It's one of the reasons why on your show, in fact, a month ago, I said that Chair Powell should resign, is because the longer he stays there, the more he attracts attacks on the institution. And the greater the attacks, the greater the risk to Fed independence. And all of us have an interest in an independent central bank. Don't underestimate the role of the chair. People would describe the Fed as chair-centric, meaning that the chair has enormous influence on decisions.
He's like the whip.
Yeah. And people don't like going against the chair, and that's the tradition of the Fed. Also, the Fed, unlike the Bank of England, doesn't have external members. So what you get is groupthink. You get the Fed completely captive to a certain idea. Today, they're completely captive to data dependency. That's the word they prefer. The problem is data's backward-looking, and they're not taking a view of the future. Yeah, lagging in a serious way. And even we have questions about the data itself.
Yep.
So they don't have a strategic vision of the economy, which is very different from the previous Feds.
Well,
see, that's why I don't make the big bucks. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment, and share. But that is a brilliant answer, angle I did not look at or think about. But when he said it, yes, that makes a lot of sense. The oh my God. Fed Chair Jerome Powell is the influencer. It's basically what he's saying. He can't obviously unanimously go in there and just say, hey, I want it, 25% basis. Can't do that. But he can sway people and why they should all vote this direction. And yes, it feels like every press conference, we're data dependent. We're data dependent. Well, we all knew a year ago the data was bad. I mean, the way they calculate um, living, housing costs and expense is so like asinine, and I don't even know. It's like, why are we adopting these archaic ways of calculating and compiling all this data? We have so many tools and disposal and ways of doing it now that is so much more accurate. And I think I've never understood why they wait a month or two in arrears to like compile data to give us none of it makes sense. But he's absolutely right. I think at this point with Jerome Powell and Trump, it's become a spectacle, and I think you have to yield at this point to the president, and you don't have that much time left anyway. Next year, you're gone. I do think it would behoove him to strongly consider to go ahead and just bow out, and you had a good run at it and just go from there, because I agree. The last thing we need is our Federal Reserve Bank like in question. You know, if it's legitimate, the legit questioning the legitimacy of it, because then you think mortgage rates are high now. When that 10-year goes up, just from the, you know, the people not trusting it, oh man, that could be real nasty. So we don't want that.
The president can throw blowtorches and all kinds of things at Jay Powell, but in the past several meetings, and certainly going back to November, he's been questioned and he has steadfastly said this. Let's listen in.
Hi, Victoria Guida with Politico. Some of the president-elect's advisors have suggested that you should resign. If he asked you to leave, would you go?
No.
Can you follow up on, do you think that legally you're not required to leave?
No.
He's not going.
So first, I think it's right that the president should not fire the Fed chair. But that does not mean that looking at the integrity of the Fed, the chair himself should not take a step that protects the institution. He's gone in May. We will hear about a new Fed chair in the next 4 to 8 weeks. He will become a lame duck. So what exactly is he fighting for? It's not clear to me, but what's clear to me is what he's risking. And that's the independence of the central bank.
Well, I don't know, but he would say he's fighting for independence of the Fed and not being pressured, or some would say bullied, by a president. I mean, we saw this in the past where President Nixon did the same to his then Federal Reserve Chair, Arthur Burns, and that ended up in disaster. Burns cut rates, and then we had stagflation. Listen, Reagan wasn't thrilled with Paul Volcker, but Paul Volcker saved the day by keeping rates high and quelling the stagflation that we saw in the 80s.
So this is a very different situation. For Arthur Burns, he should have resigned. He shouldn't have taken the pressure from President Nixon, and he shouldn't have caused what was a huge inflationary issue.
Okay, but then what happens is, and you said the Fed independence. President Trump has been clear that nobody who gets the Fed job coming up should leave rates on pause. They have to cut rates.
So I was with you when I said in July they should have cut rates. Right. Yes, they should have cut rates, but that's an economic argument, not a political argument. That's an economic argument.
Okay, yeah, keep it with the economy, and you say that is totally warranted. What about a 50 basis point cut then?
So we may get a repeat of last year. Remember last year in July, the Fed said, absolutely not, we're not cutting rates. Come September, they cut 50 basis points.
Correct.
This would happen if we get another weak employment report. If we get another weak employment report, then it is not flashing yellow lights. It is flashing red light about the jobs market. And the Fed will need to act, and act decisively.
We got the Fed minutes from the most recent meeting, and we were just talking with Rick Reeder of BlackRock about that. And
by the way, he's a great candidate for Fed chair.
Really?
Yes.
Why?
Him and Kevin Walsh have a really good understanding of the markets. They have experience. They're really good economists, and they can communicate extremely well.
I don't know, guys. What do you think? I would think if you work for any big, I mean, most of these guys do anyway. Who am I kidding? You would think it would be a conflict of interest, but hey, I think there's a lot of conflict of interest in the government anyway, and not just because of Trump or anything like that. I think it's always been like that. Like, no matter you're Democratic or Republican, there's always conflict of interest. These guys have stakeholders. I mean, I'm not going to go down the list, but look at all the congressmen and women that have interest in these companies, and they can go into Congress and then leave, be multimillionaires in a matter of a few years. I think that's, I mean, so whatever. Conflict of interest is all rampant in the government.
What about Christopher Waller, the Fed governor?
He's also a good candidate. So the good news is you have, among the 11, you have quite a few that are really good candidates. It's not as if we will go from Chair Powell to something much worse. No, you've got some really good candidates right now.
I don't know why you're not on the list.
You have really good candidates already on the list.
Well, if you had it between Warsh and Reeder.
I think they both are equally suited for the job, and I think they both would do a great job.
It's great to have you, Mohammed. And as we continue to watch this drama play out, Friday, what do you think he has to say? Fed Chair Powell, what must he say on Friday?
What must he say, or what will he say?
What must he say?
What he must say is signal that the employment side is becoming the thing, what they should be more worried about, and they're going to cut in September.
Well, there you have it, folks. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and let me know what you think in the comments. Are we headed for rate cuts? Does it matter? I don't know. All right, you guys. See you next time.